Italy's an incredible place, and this trip encompassed perhaps more beauty in every sense of the word than any trip I'd taken before or since. We visited Rome, Naples, the Amalfi Coast, including Positano, Amalfi, Ravello, made it north to Lago di Como, spent time on the Island of Capri twice. It was just a remarkable trip. If you've never been overseas, really, if you head to Europe, make it Italy. Going to Asia, I'd suggest either Japan or Thailand. We had a few days in this historic city of Rome. It's really quite incredible, the history of the place, visiting the Roman Forum, seeing the Vatican City and its museums. We had a few days in a small hotel room near Vatican. It was small but opulent and beautiful. And after our time in Rome, we picked up an Opal convertible and headed south to Amalfi. I remember I stopped on the side of the autostrada to examine our road map. Almost immediately, the Italian Highway Patrol stopped. Oh, gee, I'm going to be in trouble, I thought. Nope, they just wanted to make sure we were okay, and we're all smiles. As we headed south, we got lost in town in Naples, trying to find our way onto the coastal road to the Amalfi area. A nice Italian fellow pulled over, about my age, to offer to help. There was really no verbal communication at all. I showed him the map, and as I don't speak Italian and he didn't speak English, gestures were exchanged and he indicated I was to follow him. He would guide us to the road. Great. He was driving a small economy car, but immediately set off Con Brio, flogging his little machine for all its 1-liter engine was worth, slashing wildly through traffic, almost on 3 wheels, at a pace I'm sure would have qualified us for a front row start at the next Italian Grand Prix. I was forced to keep up in my too large and wallowing rented convertible, both to maintain my American driving honor and not to get lost again. I slightly curbed one wheel and aged likely a year in the 5-minute duration of this race, but no one was killed or wrecked as far as I know, as I didn't dare check my mirrors to see what unfolded behind us as we careened across the busy city in the middle of the day. The Opal, which was of modest proportions by American standards, was big in Italy. This soon came into play again. Once we reached the stunning coastal road, the excitement began anew. The car was as wide as the lane, and there were only 2 lanes for the traffic. This was okay sometimes until the giant European tour buses came looming towards us in the oncoming lane. Mix in the rock cliff on one side of the road, along with the available hundreds of meters cliff fall into the gorgeous blue Tyrinian Sea below, and you had a rather unnerving path to follow. The best part was when you entered a tunnel, which was even narrower, preferably featuring some curves and an oncoming bus as well, and you had then real excitement. I remember shouting, "Pull the mirrors in," as it was that close. There was just some careful aiming and using the force to manage surviving without a collision, with maybe 2 inches to spare on either side. The mirrors then had to be snapped back out, as these road conditions didn't stop the average Italian motorist from channeling his inner desire to demonstrate that he clearly should have been chosen as a Formula One driver for Ferrari as they swept past me on this narrow mountain lane. I think the Amalfi Coast, which we wandered, is one of the most beautiful places in the world. I'll never forget the little cliffside hotels discovered, the hillside paradise of Ravello, where we enjoyed a long lunch on the hillside, over terraced vineyards and the sea below surrounding us. The Island of Capri was a revelation in itself. It's a short ferry ride from the mainland, and if you get off and stay at the immediate landing area, you'll just get a small, glittery tourist trap and shopping zone. Its treasures begin a few hundred meters away. Famous for the pants, it was also the favored retreat of Roman empires. Its treasures begin a few hundred meters away, where cars are banned and your bags are ferried to the hotels along winding paths on golf carts. Capri, famous for the name of the pants, it was also the favored retreat of Roman emperors, some of the most powerful rulers known to human history. My thought was that these people could choose anywhere in their vast empire, and they chose Capri. There must be something about the place. We stayed in a fantastic hotel, swam in the Blue Grotto, wandered the ruins of Villa Jovis, the Palace of Tiberius, ate great food, and drank limoncello surrounded by the sea. We actually went twice as we had a day or two spare at the end of the trip. We were in the northern part of Italy. While the coast roads and cities were a challenge, one could traverse the body of most of the country in a long morning. There are speed limits and rules on the autostrada, but as far as I could tell, they exist only on paper. You are free to drive as fast and crazily as you wish. Just keep your eye in the rearview mirror, because someone is always coming faster and crazier. Just imagine the unlimited speed sections of the German Autobahn, but without any discipline and a heavy dose of Latin bravado. It's survival of the fastest. We eventually had a Fiat Stilo rental for the inland portions of the trip, covering Milan, Modena, the Ferrari factory, and Lago di Como. We met up with my cousin John Beniston and his girlfriend Miriam in Milan, and then went on to Como. I recall I bought a number of ties, and Nancy almost broke her neck walking from one shop while staring at another. Italy, I'm convinced, is one of the greatest countries of the world. If the Catholics are right and there is a God that kicked Adam and Eve out of Eden, well, this God must be forgiving, as we were gifted Italy. Modena was awesome. We had lunch at Enzo Ferrari's favorite restaurant, toured his still preserved office, and some of the factory grounds. Venice is an incredible place, famous, of course, for its canals and the Piazza San Marco, which I really think is the most beautiful plaza in all of Europe. It's peaceful and beautiful riding the gondolas through the city. I have some memories of my first trip I'd ever made there, which was in the early 1980s. I was almost out of money on a backpacker's trip through Europe, and as I traversed Italy, I decided to save money. I would simply sleep on the trains. So each day, as I moved from one city to the next, I would look for a slow-moving overnight express train that would allow me to sleep undisturbed overnight, either on a luggage rack, in a hall, or a vestibule on the train. I did this for several days. I still recall when I arrived in Venice. It was early in the morning. The sun wasn't quite up. And out in front of the train station, there was a big plaza, and it was filled with fellow backpackers on their mats with their sleeping bags and their backpacks, getting some free rest at night in front of the train station, and I quickly joined them. I was tired. Sleeping on a train doesn't give you good rest. In almost no time, the sun was coming up, and then arrived the Carabinieri, the Italian police. And while they were gracious enough to allow us dirty backpackers to sleep in front of the train station overnight, they did expect that all be up and out at dawn when the regular paying tourists arrived at the station. They wandered among the crowd and shouted in Italian. I'm sure it meant get up. Anything less than a quick reaction got you a nice kick in the ribs. That will wake you up and get you moving. Fortunately, I saw this occurring with other backpackers as they were being awakened, and I quickly packed my goods. Later in the day, I enjoyed Venice on the cheap by riding, I think it's pronounced the Vaporizzati, the little boats that operate as public transit within Venice on its canals. You can ride them for the equivalent price of a bus fare, and I would simply get on one and ride it and ride it and ride it until I decided I'd return to my original starting point, thus having a beautiful sun-drenched and spray-splashed tour of the city. Later in the hot afternoon, I remember as I was a young, fit guy, I was walking around in my shorts with my shirt off. This turned out to be something else the Italian police didn't approve of. After being stopped and listening to some shouting, and having their baton sticks pointed at my shirt that was tucked in my back pocket, I understood. When we were in Rome, we did manage to see the Pope making his, I think it was Friday, audience that he did regularly. I think that was a regularly scheduled event. A couple stories about Rome, and in particular Vatican City. Vatican City and the artworks at St. Peter's are awe-inspiring. No other way to describe it. The first time I visited there in the early 80s, I'd had a tour book that told me that you had to be properly attired to be let in. And so I knew I needed to have a decent shirt and long pants in order to be allowed to enter. And I did, and I toured through the sites, and it was amazing. Upon emerging, there was a group of tourists from other countries that had made their pilgrimage to Rome that were actually serious Catholics and had now been denied at the gates due to the fact that they didn't have long pants. I ended up helping out some young guy from where I don't know, I think South Europe, Southeastern Europe, perhaps, from his accent. We couldn't really communicate. But I agreed to loan him my jeans for half an hour while he made it in. So there behind a tree, I handed over my jeans and he gave me his shorts, and he went in for his half-hour tour and later emerged. He was ever so grateful and nearly tearful at the fact that he was allowed to have this experience. I hope you enjoyed this video showing you some of the wonders I experienced on my adventures in Italy.